Hello and welcome to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez. I am a principal in search of wisdom, and I have found productivity to be a great tool for success. Today, I have the great and distinguished honor of interviewing Elijah Carbajal, who is a Title I Reading Interventionist, an author, and podcaster from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Elijah Carbajal, who are you?
Hey, well, thank you, Dr. Efrian. I appreciate this opportunity, and man, thank you so much for just having me. You were saying that by the end of this, I would be hoping, like, I would be saying, I'm so glad I did this, but I'm already happy that I'm here. So,
Awesome.
yeah. Just again, thank you for having me. I'm, like you said, a Title I reading interventionist, but before that, I did fourth grade and third grade for about 8 years, mostly fourth grade, but did a couple years of third grade as well. Um, Lived in New Mexico my whole life, so I'm proud to say that proud New Mexican, and happy to be working in the Albuquerque Public School District, the biggest district here in the state. Um, my wife Tracy, I know you met her at the Teach Better conference last year. She's also a teacher here in the district, working as an art teacher at a middle school. And so, I'm sure I'll be talking a little bit about her as I was thinking about what I wanted to say today. But um, yeah, I'm an author of a book, like you mentioned. The book is called A Place They Love. That released in October of 2022, so it's still fairly new, and having a lot of buzz still, and it's a lot of excitement about that. And I'm just happy to get my message out. And the heart of the book really is what I'm really excited about, to get into the hands of educators and principals like yourself, and teachers and educational assistants. Really, whoever works with students is welcome to pick up a copy and read it for themselves. And
Beautiful.
you also mentioned I host a podcast, which is true. I host the Shut Up and Teach podcast, which, like your podcast here, just became part of the Teach Better podcast network. So I'm a proud member of that network, alongside you, Dr. Fran.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I was able to observe you and your wife interact, and I can tell there's a lot of love there. Thank you so much, Elijah. So, Elijah, can you please walk us through your professional trajectory up to this point?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. So my career, my trajectory is kind of interesting because I came from a homeschool family. I have a family. There was a family of six of us, so I have five. I have four brothers, one baby sister, who is no longer a baby. She's got babies of her own now, and but my mom was a special education teacher. Prior to homeschooling us, so she had that educational background and know-how and the skill and all that to teach us. So my mom felt like it was a calling for her. She definitely would say, don't homeschool if you're not called to do it. But she definitely was called to do it, and she did a fantastic job. But that meant for me, I didn't step foot into a public school classroom until my first day of student teaching. So, I mean, talk about culture shock, just
Yes.
in a room with, I think there was like 22 sixth graders, sixth grade elementary. They're in Belen, New Mexico. And, just overwhelmed, just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But I remember telling someone at the end of my first week, I think I can do this though. Like, I think I can figure this out. Like, and I think this is for me. There've definitely been times throughout my career where I'm like, maybe this is not for me, but I always come back around and, kind of, come back to my purpose and all that. Um, so it started off, super humble beginnings, not having any educational, public education experience, knowing about things like field trips and buses and cafeteria and, all that stuff, so just school culture, school language, all those things was so brand new to me. And so I had a lot of learning to do. And I'm thankful for my mentors that I've had. Miss Adrienne Jaramillo was my mentor teacher during my first year of student teaching. And then uh, woman by the name of Heidi Dudley. She's now a principal here in Albuquerque, but she was a fantastic support to me in helping me take over a classroom. And then, of course, my wife, Tracy, has been a big mentor and a big support to me along the way, just helping me grow and learn and, express myself and, teach with passion and all that. And so I've grown a lot. I've grown a lot as an educator, but it's not because of myself. It's because of the people that I surround myself with. And I think I've heard, we've heard people say, you shouldn't be the smartest one in the room, or try not to be the smartest one in the room. And that's the way I kind of look at it. I look for the people who I know can build me up, and the folks that I know that can help this trajectory continue. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, there's just been a lot to learn along the way. Like every job, like every career, there's a lot to learn, and we make mistakes along the way. I've made my fair share of them, both, dealing with students, dealing with fellow teachers, meeting, there's just everything, that teachers kind of go through and educators have to deal with. But through all of that, we reflect and we learn, and we look back and we ask ourselves, what can I learn from this moment? How did this benefit my students? So on. And, we just take it one day at a time, and so I wouldn't say that I've arrived at any level at all. Not at all. I'm still learning. If anything, I'm still learning.
Beautiful. Elijah, do you remember the moment that you said, that's what I want to be? I want to be a teacher. Can you walk us through that?
So there were two moments actually, that you bring up that I'd like to discuss. So the first is when I was 14 years old. I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was 14 years old, but I knew I wanted to be a music teacher. I didn't want to be a gen ed teacher or reading intervention. You can see in the background, I've got guitars hanging on there. I've got a piano in front of me. I've got other instruments that you can't see. And so I'm very musical. I'm very creative in that capacity. And that was the first time that I felt super passionate about something, that I felt like I can take this and give it to somebody else. And so I thought, what better way than to teach? And so I knew at 14 that I was going to go into education, knew that for sure. But my plan was to teach music education, not general education. And was going through college on course and all that. And then about year and a half, maybe 2 years before graduation, plans changed. Talked to my guidance counselors there, and they were saying things like, music isn't bad. There's a need for elementary male teachers. There is a need for music teachers, but just something to consider. And so I gave it a lot of thought and realized, if I'm teaching, I'm teaching. That's all I care about, as long as I can instill something and give back to kids and families and all that. And so the decision was made kind of not on spur of the moment, but after some thought, of course, reflection, and decided I'm going to change my major and go into general education, which was a great choice. Not that music would have been a bad choice, but it's gotten me where I am today. And, sometimes in the moment, we can't always understand like why things are happening or why we're changing, but we look back, and hindsight is always 2020. And so we can see how everything kind of fell into place. Beautiful. So you mentioned there, I mentioned there was one more time where I was like, okay, I'm going to be a teacher. It was actually, I was already teaching, believe it or not. I was already teaching. I taught 4 years. And, but my plan up to this point was not to stay in teaching. I'd gotten into it, felt like I could do it. But then there was a point where I thought, how can I make another impact in a different way? And so I was exploring different ideas. And so there was the thought about going to get my social work degree and license, and was kind of set up for that. And then there was a personal event in my life, that kind of shook me a little bit and shook up things, and it made me reflect again and think, okay, what is it that I really truly am gonna do? Is it, what is it that I'm gonna do? And I talked a lot with family, with friends, mentors, and all that. And eventually I came to the conclusion that, it's not time. It's not the right time to make a switch. And so I told myself, if I'm not switching careers, and if I'm gonna stay in teaching, I've got to do this thing for real. Not that I wasn't, but I was like, I've got to step it up. Like, things, like, I want things to be different for me. I want things to be different for my students. Like, I want better results. And so that was kind of that second moment of like, I'm gonna be a teacher. It was kind of like a reawakening of like that, like, come back to your purpose and all that, of like, I'm gonna be a teacher. I'm gonna step up my game. I'm gonna do it, do it 100%.
I like that because in life, especially when you are young, you think that you just have one trajectory, and
Mm-hmm.
we're always questioning ourselves: Am I doing the right thing? Am I not? I wonder, Elijah, was becoming a teacher perhaps a product of you desiring to be in a school when you were being homeschooled?
Not necessarily, but I think it does have to do with the fact that I was homeschooled. So, sitting outside, sitting around the kitchen table or, dining room table, wherever we're at in the room, doing our homework, and doing our schoolwork, and, looking out the door, and, it's 7:30, buses are driving by, picking up kids, going off to school. 3:30 rolls around, buses are driving by, dropping kids off. And so this thought would often occur to me: what's it like to ride the bus? What's it like to ride the bus? What's it like? But it was never like a, I want to be there. It was more of a, I'm just sort of curious about that,
Mm,
but I appreciate what I have. Now, my mom is definitely one of my biggest inspirations. My mom, as a teacher, as a person, is one of my biggest inspirations. And love her to death, and love, the sacrifices she made, and the dedication and time she put into raising us, and to also teaching us as well, not just bringing kids up and making sure their, Maslow's needs are met, but also their academic needs are met as well. That's huge. And so it's not something I ever take for granted, or, I appreciate that. So I think homeschooling kind of, in a way, sort of did drive me into education. But more specifically, I'd say my mom had a big hand in that. Also, my grandparents. I had grandparents who were teachers, and an uncle that was a teacher. So it, I don't want to say runs in the family, but, they're educators in the family, and so I had those models to kind of look up to, and hear stories about their teaching careers and all that. So there was encouragement along the way, for sure.
beautiful. Thank you so much, Elijah. So, like in Back to the Future, if you could go back in time to any of the positions you have held, what would the Elijah of today tell the Elijah of then?
Wow. There's a lot that I would want to tell old Elijah. I think a start is, I would go back to certain points in my career and tell myself not to forget my purpose. And I don't talk about whys. I know that's a big common one. It's like, and I'm not knocking anybody who's like, remember your why. But for me, purpose, that word just hits differently for me. And so I remember, these moments where I probably lost sight of my purpose, and it just became routine, right? It just became, show up, do your thing, leave, show up, do your thing, leave. And I look back and I go, man, like, I kind of lost sight of what I was doing there, and it wasn't for a long time. It wasn't like full, all these years and stuff. It's just little moments where, I wish I could go back in time to some of these moments and say, don't forget your purpose, right? Regardless of your position, Elijah, you can still fulfill your purpose. And that's another thing I would probably go back and tell myself. I made a change last year, middle of the year. That was kind of a tough decision to make, and took a while for me to come to. But eventually, it was the right choice, and the right timing and all that. And so, but I think if I could go back to that moment, I would tell myself, you're transitioning, your position is changing, Elijah, but your purpose hasn't.
Awesome. Deeply profound. I appreciate that. Elijah, as you know, also as an author, reading books is such a luxury. If you will have to gift two books, one fiction and one nonfiction, which one will those be and why?
Okay. Um, am I gifting these to like another teacher or to a student or?
Whoever you decide.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is your show.
So I did gift a book actually recently, and I'll go with the nonfiction or the fiction first, actually. So I gifted a book to our custodian who was telling me we were talking and got on this topic about books, and he was saying, "Oh, one of my favorite books is Bud Not Buddy." He mentioned the Watsons Go to Birmingham, and he said, "I love those like classic literature books." And I said, "Come inside really quick. Come to my classroom." And I gifted him a copy of The Giver by Lois Lowry. And that book is one that I stumbled upon by accident. Again, if I hadn't gone into teaching, probably would have never heard about it. But I was in the 6th grade elementary class, and they were reading this as a novel study. And my teacher said, "Here, take a copy home. We're going to finish by the time, by next week. So take it and finish it for yourself." And I read the book in one day. That's probably one of the only books I can think of that I've read in one day, that I sat down cover to cover and read it in one day, and was just so drawn in and had questions at the end and was confused and just like wanting more, and then but also satisfied. And so it's become one of my favorite books. And then I found out there's this whole quartet. There's 3 more books that follow it. So I picked those up. I've read that whole series with my students before a couple times, and the kids have just fallen in love with those characters, and to the point where at the end of that there's this girl that's like, I'm really happy like for the end, but I'm kind of sad that the whole story is over. And I said, well, that's the sign of a good book. So I'm going to use the words of my students. I would gift The Giver because it's one of those books that you will be sad when it ends, but you'll be happy for the resolution. So that's that one there. Now, as far as nonfiction, gosh, man, I've been reading a lot lately, stuff about music. And so that's kind of been on my mind recently. I've read, I'm going to rattle off a few of them, but I'll pick one to gift away if I was going to gift them away. But there's one called Music is History by Questlove. That's just phenomenal book about how music can help us understand history better and timelines and all that. I just read Not Afraid, which is the evolution of Eminem, picking up on his life right after the Encore album and moving forward from there. And just, he gets a bad rap, pun intended. But, he gets a bad rap sometimes as, being this villain, this, as he says, the criminal and all that. But when you dive into it, you realize you get to see the human side of Marshall Mathers, and you get to see, who he is as an individual and his struggles with addiction and, overcoming that, and, bouncing back in his career, after being out for years. And so there's so many books, but that's been the one most recently. And like Picasso says, my most recent one is always my favorite. So I'm going to go with that one, The Evolution of Eminem. And just because, like, for anyone who's musical, you're going to love it. For anyone who's big into like those comeback stories, the evolution, the deep processes of, the process of evolution and all that, they're going to love this book as well. There's one more that I did read that was Dave Grohl's memoir. I think it's called The Storyteller. And it's his kind of like his memoir, Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters and, Nirvana. Phenomenal book. He's a great storyteller. If you can listen to it on Audible, do so, because he reads it himself, and it's just phenomenal.
Cool. Awesome recommendations. I appreciate it, Elijah. Let's give some recognition to the Teach Better Network.
Mm-hmm. This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Okay, Elijah, let's talk about who is or who are your biggest influences?
My biggest influences. Well, to start, I would say definitely my wife, Tracy. Absolutely. She, when I moved, I'd moved from Albuquerque to Aztec, New Mexico, and she kind of became that mentor that I didn't know I needed. We weren't together or anything at the time. We were just friends. She was the art teacher at the school I was teaching fourth grade, but she really helped me learn the culture of the school. She helped me integrate, and get, involved in stuff. And she helped me understand, you know, really what it kind of means to teach like a pirate. She was the first person to introduce me to that idea of like teach like a pirate. And we also had some common interests. So we'd both read Ron Clark's book, The End of Molasses Classes. So we had a lot in common, and she just kind of helped me like get there. She kind of helped. I kind of look at it as like I was like leaning over the edge looking, and she just kind of went over and like pushed me over. And so, but it was the push that I needed. And so she, to this day, is still one of my favorite, and she is my favorite person, but she's one of my biggest inspirations to this day. In fact, we were talking the other day, it was not last night, but Thursday night, the night before. And she, we were just having this conversation about our day, our, things we were learning, things we want to try next week, things we want to try in the future. And we just had this thought of like, we just had this moment of like, we really need these moments, don't we? Like to sit and talk and debrief and like plan with each other. And so those moments to us are special and they're important, and we don't like to miss those moments. So definitely Tracy Taylor. There's a teacher I work with now. I actually graduated with her in college. And so we ended up, whatever it is, 6-7 years later, ended up at the same school. But her name is Deanna Barella, and she's a phenomenal educator. She was a classroom teacher for I think 8 years, and then now she's working as a transformational coach at our school and doing a great job with that. And moving to that school and working with her has been a great experience. Obviously working with someone from college is kind of a cool experience, but when you top it off with her being a great educator, doing what's best for kids and for teachers and all that, it just makes it better and inspires me to be better directly at my school for my students. So those are some folks there. My PLN, there's way too many to mention, but my folks on Twitter, on the Facebook, on Facebook and Instagram. Of course, we just heard from the Teach Better team, the podcast network and all that. So I'm just super thankful for everyone in my corner.
Beautiful. Can we go back for those that don't know? Can you tell us what it is to teach like a pirate?
Yeah. So Teach Like a Pirate is a book written by Dave Burgess, now with Dave Burgess Consulting. And we're huge fans of Dave Burgess in my household. We love Dave Burgess. We love, the publishing company and some of the work that's come out of there, including, things like, Teach Better and, Kids Deserve It. So, but Teach Like a Pirate, if I'm going to try to remember all of them, so the pirate is an acronym. So P stands for passion. I stands for immersion. R stands for rapport. Let's see, where am I at? PIRA, ask and analyze. T, transform. And E, enthusiasm. So teaching like a pirate means that you incorporate those aspects into your lesson and into your instruction, and really like just making the lessons engaging. That's the big thing that I took away from that, is like lessons don't have to be dry and boring. Like there's a way to make every lesson kind of fun, even if it's not over the top, the big dog and pony show. One of the hooks that Dave Burgess recommends is like dressing up. So I dress up a lot. I dress up like the other day I was Cat in the Hat. I've been, an astronaut. I've been a pirate. I've been all these different characters. But even if it's not over the top like that, even if it's just adding like, hey, I'm going to add this music element to the lesson, or I'm going to change, instead of having them do a worksheet to show their work, I'm going to have them make a painting. It's just some kind of different hook to mix it up and to make it more engaging and exciting. That was my big takeaway with that book. And so it wasn't like, yes, you see Elijah dressed up and you see all those things, but there's a lot that happens on a daily basis that a lot of folks don't see that comes out of that book. And so I recommend, that's one of my top recommendations to anyone who's, looking to better their practice, looking to spark engagement, build rapport with your kids. That's one of my first go-tos is go check out Teach Like a Pirate by Dave Burgess and, see what it's all about. And then there's the Pirate series, of course, which, there's things like Run Like a Pirate, Tech Like a Pirate, Balance Like a Pirate, the Leading series that Dave Burgess Consulting has. So, and I promise we're not paid by Dave Burgess to say all of this, but we just believe in it that much. So
yes, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so all of us at some point believe that we're not good enough, that we're not going to be able to do that. That's not for people like us. And psychologists call this imposter syndrome. How do you address imposter syndrome?
So I hit imposter syndrome when I wrote the book. When I was writing my book, A Place They Love. And there's still moments where I'm like, did I really do that? But like in the writing, it was like, should I really be doing this? Like, I'm the kid who doesn't have like the public school background, right? I'm the homeschool kid from New Mexico. Like, everybody forgets that New Mexico is a state, believe it or not. Like, I remember for true story, was at Disneyland and we were talking in line because in line for Magic Mountain, it's like 2 hours. So You're talking with these people, strike up a conversation. Where are you from? Oh, we're from New Mexico. And I kid you not, this guy looked at us and he said, well, I've always wanted to go to Tijuana. How close is that to New Mexico? Oh, and we said, I was 14 at the time. I said, no, New Mexico, USA. Like, we're part of the same country we're in right now. We didn't have to cross the border to get here. So, but it's like, sometimes that hits me. Like, you're just that kid from New Mexico. Like, people think you live in another country, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's how far off the grid, that's how far off of people's radar you are sometimes. And so, there's that mindset came a lot of just like, am I like, I don't know, like, and I had to lean on my inspirations during that time with like Tracy, of course, being my wife right there in the moment could say, trust your process. Trust your process. Like, you've gone through the process of writing out chapters and outlines and putting thought into which examples you want to use, which research you want to use to back it up. You've gone through your process. Trust your process. And so I think that's something that I've benefited from her saying that, of trust your process, because when I doubt myself, when I doubt who I am, I can lean back on what I do, right? I can lean back on, this is my process of evolving, of learning, of applying. And so if I trust that process, I know that I'm going to continue to grow. But if I just get stuck in my head of like, it's me, like, it's just like, that's where I get bogged down. So trusting in my process of, how I do things, how I evolve, how I reflect, how I apply, and those sorts of things have really helped me overcome imposter syndrome, especially when I was writing the book. Yeah. I mean, that moment hits you where it's like, everyone's going to read this and they're going to realize just how fake you are, or just how not cool, or you're not legit, or whatever the case, whatever word comes to mind. And, but Tracy, really helped me through that. There were a lot of folks in my corner that just supported me along the way. The folks at EduMatch, who I'm published with, Sarah Thomas and Mandy Froelich, were super helpful all along the way. And, so just, I think overcoming imposter syndrome means you got to get out of your head. You got to get out of your head. For me, I trust the process and I trust the people around me.
Beautiful. Let's talk about your book. Can you tell us what is the book about? What is the birth of you saying, I'm going to write a book? And what were your lessons learned?
So I decided I wanted to write a book after I started blogging. I went to Teach Better 2019, felt really inspired to start reflecting on my own practice And so I took up blogging to do that. And so I started a little blog, and it was just short. I remember Medium was the site that I used, and it says like, this is about a 2-minute read or a 5-minute read or 7 minutes or whatever. And I think the longest one I had was honestly like 5 minutes. They weren't lengthy reads. They were just short little snippets, little reflections. And, but I kind of noticed this theme running through them of like, let's make school fun. Let's make school engaging. Let's make school, somewhere where that kids love to be and that they're excited to come to. And that just kept popping up over and over and over and over and over again in all these blogs. And so I, kind of thought about it. I thought if I could compile them and put them together as a collection, like a book, like that might be kind of cool. And, felt the encouragement from family, from my wife, from other educators in my PLN that I reached out to with the idea of. And so I said, okay, let's try it, and, pitched to some publishing companies. EduMatch Publishing picked it up, which I'm very thankful for, because working with them was just a phenomenal experience. And Dr. Sarah Thomas and Mandy Froelich are just so helpful and supportive and encouraging all along the way. So yeah, sitting down to write it, just compiled what I needed, obviously tweaked some stuff, added some new things, took stuff out. The whole editing process became really fun to me. It wasn't at first, but it became fun to me. And I appreciated that part of the whole writing process. But the title, "A Place They Love," that was just it. Was that phrase I think popped up in one of my blogs, is like, school should be a place that kids love. And so that's where the phrase came from, of we need to make school a place that kids love. And that's the theme of the book. So really encouraging teachers to be engaged themselves, not just engaged students, but the teachers, to be engaged, to build positive relationships, celebrating kids for, outside the school, even if you can't go to their outside event, but like, how can you make a way to celebrate that inside the classroom so they're still recognized? What do kids need to hear? Things like, thank you, hello, it's good to see you, I'm sorry. Like, when was the last time teachers apologized to students, right? So, it's really, the book centers on making school a place that kids love, which in fact impacts school culture. So the full title of the book is "A Place They Love: Creating a Healthy School Culture and Positively Impacting Students." So by doing that, I wrote directly to the teachers, because I knew they're the ones that work firsthand with the students. There's a single chapter in there specifically for administrators and administration, but anyone who's working directly with students, principals, teachers, EAs, whoever, even substitute teachers could pick this up and I think really benefit from it, because it really speaks to the heart of the message. The message really shines in this book about, let's make school a place that kids love to be at. Let's make sure that they love it. Let's make sure that they're safe here. Let's make sure that they're excited to come to school, right? Dave Burgess in Teach Like a Pirate asked the question, if you had to sell tickets to your show, would you be teaching in an empty classroom? And so that's kind of that hits hard for me when I think about making school a place that they love. Like, yeah, do kids actually want to be here? Like, if they had the option, would they be here? And so I really strive in my school and in my position to really make sure that the teachers are excited to be there, that the students that I service and the students that I don't service are also excited and engaged and feel safe and feel like it's a place that they love. And the book has lots and lots of tips, little tidbits and nuggets of truth and wisdom in there to help educators reach that goal.
Beautiful. I am so curious. What is the advice? I'm always trying to improve my art as a school administrator. What is the advice do you have for principals?
So in that chapter, it's called Dear Administration, and I wrote it kind of like a letter format. Like, it's even signed at the bottom, "Sincerely, a teacher who loves you." But, in there's some things that I encourage to stop doing if you're doing those things. So there's one thing in particular, like stop taking away recess. That's one thing I'm kind of anti against. Like, I'm sorry, it's a 10-minute block. Like, even if it needs to be structured, at our school, we, for kids that have had, behavior issues or behavior problems, they might get a structured recess where they're still getting some kind of recess, but it's, it's not necessarily looking like everybody out on the playground, but they still get some kind of recess, right? So I'm very much against do not take away recess. As much as we can, incorporate, recess and movement into the day, things like that. But there's a lot that I encourage administrators to keep doing. During the pandemic, there were a lot of eyes that were open to the fact that like the haves and have-nots are real, and not every student's situation at home looks what my situation looks like. So there were kids that we were teaching who didn't have Wi-Fi. They didn't have any internet because it was like where they lived, they weren't supported out there with internet. They didn't have it. And so principals had to keep that in mind as they moved forward. So I encourage them a lot to like keep equity in mind. Keep in mind that teachers have trauma. Some students have trauma, and they're working through that, but they still have to come to school and kind of work through that as well. And so there's just there's a lot that I encourage administrators to keep doing. A lot of it is keep doing the great work that you already are doing. And if there's things like taking away recess or using writing as punishment, right? Oh, you did this, so now you have to write 100 lines of I will not talk back to the teacher. I will not talk back to the teacher, right? I'm like, that's hurting a love of writing. Like, let's stop that practice. So there are some things that I do encourage to keep doing, and then some things I encourage to stop doing as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Elijah. So, as you know, successful people stay on top of their productivity, but this means different things for different people. So, how does Elijah get organized to ensure that he does all this stuff and still have a fructiferous life?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you asked this question, because it's something that I've thought about a lot this year, actually. When it comes to boundaries. So I recently read a book called Teach and Still Have Time to Pee. And it's written by an author, educator named Jamie Johnson, who phenomenal lady, I just love her. And I love the book itself. But it really talked about setting boundaries for ourselves, and she said, think about using the restroom. Going to use the restroom is one of the most basic forms of self-care. And teachers often work so much to the point where it's like, I went the entire day and didn't go to the bathroom once. And that's not healthy, right? That's not healthy for our bodies. That's not healthy for our emotions and our mind. And so I've started to look at my own life and say, okay, where's the boundary that I need to set? And what is it that I need to do? How do I need to organize myself so that this boundary stays firm? So I left a school where I was bringing a lot of work home. I was bringing work home. I was getting to work early. I was staying late. And it just became so stressful and so much that I said, that's it. That's the boundary. And so, excuse me. I said, first of all, I'm not bringing any work home. If it doesn't get done, it will get done tomorrow, first thing in the morning, because it's not going to grow legs and walk away. The work will still be there in the morning. And so that was one thing, just like, nope, I'm not bringing work home. But I had to do some other things to make sure I wouldn't have to bring work home. So setting boundaries means, what, this is my prep time. And I'm sorry, but it's my prep time. It's an uninterrupted prep time. I need this to get ready for the next week, for the next few days, whatever, so that I can go home when it's time to go home. I don't want to have to stay late here, right? I'm not gonna work myself into an early grave, doing this. It's for the kids, but I'm still a person too. And so I need that time to get home. It takes me about 20 minutes or so to get home in the afternoon. And I want to get home so I can listen to music, play music, write poetry, spend time debriefing with my wife, asking how her day was and listening to her. watching. I mean, I just want to relax. At the end of the day, I need to decompress and do what's best for me to recharge. And I wasn't able to do that at this other school that I was at, where I was having forced to bring work home and get there early and all that. And so it was just that boundary that I said, you know what, like, if I expect to get things done, there are some hard boundaries I need to set. So sorry, don't interrupt my prep time unless it's an absolute emergency. And it's happened. There's been some cases where I've had to, it's been interrupted, but it's okay. Like, I understand the situation, but and I'm not a jerk about it. I'm not like in everybody's face, like, it's my prep time, but it's just like, hey, this is, if at all possible, please don't interrupt, because I'm trying to stay productive myself and keeping myself accountable of, like, this is my time. Don't go off and talk to people, don't go, don't go off talking and, just all that in the teacher's lounge, like, sit down, like, get focused, and so that's been a huge help to me, is just setting that boundary of, like, this is my time to plan and be productive. And so I'm going to use that time to plan and be productive.
Beautiful. I mean, the physician doesn't work when they are not on call. So that is a great way to say it. So Elijah, tell us about how do you organize your days or your weeks?
So first of all, I live by my Google Calendar. Live and die by my Google Calendar these days. If there's something I know that has to happen, it goes in at least as a reminder. And so I definitely have utilized that this year to keep myself organized. With the podcast, that I host, I started using an app called Calendly to organize my scheduled conversations with other educators, which has really, really helped me stay on top of my, like, the side hustle of the podcasting thing, and has really helped with the productivity of that. But yeah, I mean, I had to find a system that worked for me. Not everybody's going to be the same. I see some people that write in a calendar, some people write and it goes into a Google Calendar. It's easier for me because I have my phone here. I can just type it in. It sounds an alarm, and all that. And so putting things into a system that works for me is what helped. And so putting it into my Google Calendar helps me kind of organize my day. But so when I get up, that's kind of the first thing I do, first thing I do when I have my phone anyway is I'll look through the calendar and see, okay, what do I have on for today? And usually at least what's for today and what's for tomorrow. So I'm at least sort of mindful about tomorrow. And so I kind of scroll through those and kind of look through and, make my plan for the day, make sure that, everything's set. Not every time, but a lot of times before I leave, I'll check the calendar, one more time before I leave, just to make sure that my room is, set up, or that I have everything ready for the next day. It's just about, I think just being proactive with it. I don't want to share, you mentioned it, everybody has their own way. So I'm just sharing one way. This isn't Elijah's way or the highway. It's just, this is what Elijah does. And so I love my Google Calendar. I do. I absolutely love my Google Calendar. I love Calendly, for scheduling events and, keeping me on top of it. And, all those nice little bing, bing, bing reminders, really helps keep me on it. So.
Absolutely. Elijah, can you walk us through your process of lesson or unit planning?
Yes. So lesson planning, let me go through that one there. So, and unit planning. So as a reading interventionist, I service students in the MTSS or MLSS system. And so I, work with students, to find that. First of all, we give some diagnostics. There's some simple things that we do. We are letters trained, LTRS letters or LETRS letters. Going through the science of reading, making sure we understand all aspects of literacy and language development and all that. And then there's an assessment we give to kind of pinpoint exactly where students are at in their reading. So this diagnostic is really beautiful because it tells us very specific information. They know all of their alphabet. They know all their letter sounds, but they're working on building CVC. They're working to read CVC words, or they know all those things, but right now what they need to work on is vowel, consonant, E syllables. And so it's very, very specific in what it tells us where they're at. So from there, once I know, okay, so in fact, I just did this. So this is a great question that you asked, because it's fresh in my mind. I just did all the new MLSS plans were updated just yesterday. And so I, sat down to look at most recent data. I always start with that. It's not an opinion. I have to look at the hard data to see this is what their skills are. This is their strengths. This is where we're going next. And I like to word it that way to my students. It's not what you need to work on. It's where we're going next, right? This is where we're going. We're just on a journey, and this is the next stop along the way. And so from there, I can plan specifically. We've done a lot of work to pinpoint, hey, if your kids are working on digraphs, this is the unit. This is these are the weeks that you teach that. And so that's teachers really know how to go back and find, without any trouble, without taking a long time of digging through the book and the curriculum. It's, hey, it's in this unit and this week. Go back and these are the lessons that you can use. Here's the intervention. If you need more suggestions, come meet with us. So we really, really utilize data. We really utilize data to help us get started with it, and then help us pinpoint what we need to teach. So when I sit down, I kind of look it over and I say, okay, we're working on, so my kids now are working on doubles, the bonus letters, like words like puff with 2 F's, right? And so I kind of plan out, okay, like look through my curriculum, kind of pinpoint, okay, what do my kids need specifically from here? Is there something in the lesson that is important that definitely needs to be in there? Is there something for the sake of time that I can take out and substitute with a different component in there? But a lot of it adapts. The lesson planning adapts as I go. So I can make all these plans, but again, as teachers, we have to be reflective in that too. So I can go through and look at the data. I can go through and look at the curriculum, get my plan in place, right? And I can have a plan for this week, and I usually plan it about a week at a time. Of these are my lessons that I'm going to teach, and this is a progression of how it's going to go. These are materials that I'm going to use. So I in my lesson plan, I mark out, and it's not lengthy college 5-page lesson plans. It's a short template. I'm making notes, to myself, just a lot of it sometimes is handwritten too, because it's just the way I work, this is the way my brain works. And so, but I mark everything that I need, what the students need, what I need, to really make sure that I'm prepared in the moment, right? And so that I'm not, oh shoot, I forgot what you needed, or oh, I forgot to put this up on the board, or it's just so that I'm prepared, right? It's part of best practice in being prepared as a teacher. But sometimes those plans change. So as I was teaching recently, I was teaching my students about digraphs, but I kept like, something's off here, and I kept like asking, and then I finally noticed it, and they were getting confused between the I and the E short sounds. So eh and I. And so from there, now I can pinpoint, that's more data, right? It's not hardcore data, but I've heard it, I've seen it. So I know, like, okay, now I can adjust. So now my lessons are just going to have letters or words that have those vowels in them, because I know the other vowels well, but these two you're getting mixed up. So we're going to talk about them specifically while still talking about the digraph. So the lesson can change kind of at any moment, based on the student's needs. But it takes being attentive and being aware of those needs and being engaged with the students. Because if I just sit back and here's the lesson, there's no engagement on my end to know whether or not they're struggling with vowels I and E, or with digraph CK, when do I use CK instead of K, So it really takes me being engaged in that as well. So being engaged, being attentive to their needs helps me kind of plan as I go along as well, because I might plan four or 5 lessons, but after that first day, I might realize this has got to go in a different direction. So let me see what I have, and based on what I know now, let me tweak that.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Often we don't talk about the process of developing lesson and unit plans. So it's awesome to hear from you.
There's also a lot of collaboration that goes into that planning too. As a reading interventionist, I work with 3 grades currently, first, third, and fifth. And so there's collaboration that happens between those teachers and I too. It's not just I'm planning all on my own because it's their student, it's their homeroom student, and they come to me, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page because they might see something, they might have information about them that I don't have because they see them for a full day,
Yeah.
whereas I see them for 30 minutes. So they
Mm.
might have some more information of, hey, just so you know, I noticed this about little Johnny and his reading the other day when we were doing math, reading a math word problem. I noticed this, and so they can share that with me to say, okay, now I can take that back for reading intervention. So collaboration is a big part of the planning process too.
That's great. And so I'm sure you implement a lot of social skills because teachers come in all shapes and sizes and moods. What have you learned about collaborating with others?
Collaborating with others is not always easy. Um, and sometimes can be messy, right? Sometimes it can look a little messy, but I've also learned that, if both or if all parties collaborating together have the kids in mind, if they are kid
Mm.
centered and kid focused, then the collaboration really the collaboration that takes place becomes really beneficial and valuable. Because if it's just what can I do to make this easier for me, or what can we do to get a quick answer so that this collaboration meeting is over,
Mhm.
right? That doesn't benefit the student. Schools are built for students, they're not built for the adults. And so the collaboration and the lesson planning and the reflection, all that we do goes into benefiting student achievement and best outcomes for students. So I think collaboration really works if both parties that are collaborating together have that, if they're student focused and student minded first before what's easiest and what's best for me.
Amen. So, I know I'm asking you a lot of questions. I find you quite a fascinating figure. When you were writing your book, what are the lessons you have learned about the actual process of compiling all your ideas into a book, and what recommendations you have for those who are aspiring to write their own book?
So for those that are really well, I'll start with lessons. I'll start with lessons because that's what you asked first. So I learned about my own process, because I hadn't written anything on this scale before, ever. I've never written anything on this size before. And so I learned a lot about my own process and how I process things and my own way of reflecting on things before I write. There was a lot of moments where it was like, right. And it felt like, I just call it barfing on the page, where it's just like, let me just get everything out. And then I wouldn't touch it again for like a day. I'd let it sit for like a day and then go back and look at it and be like, okay, I can take this out. Okay, I can reword this. Okay, the rest of it is fine. So in that, I just learned about my process as a writer, as a human being. I just learned about myself, and what works for me, and all that. And so I think it's important. My advice for anyone who's working on that is really find your own process, because I can tell you what works for me. I can tell you what works for me, but it may not work for you, Dr. Ephraim, right? It may not work for you, and what you do may not work for the teacher in your building down the hall from you. And so in anyone doing that, as you're compiling these things, lean into your process and be reflective on what your process is. Now, there are some things like I highly suggest blogging. If that's a great way to start. It's a great way to just practice getting it out there so that the public can read it. It I had a thought and then I lost it. So, but just getting it out there, in blog format, and then really start to notice themes. I've been chatting with somebody who is actually considering writing a book, and I just have been encouraging her, look for the themes, look for those common themes within there, or have that theme in mind, because that's what's going to drive you. develop your message first. Develop the heart of it first before you start building the rest of it. I look at it as like a body. And I always start with like the heartbeat. Like, what is the heart of the book? And then like, what's the research, right? That's the brain. What's the research? What's the common, like, how does this work? How do we apply it and all that? And then from there, the rest is all detail, right? The rest is detail and examples and all that. And you can build the rest of the skeleton and all that from there. But I always start with the heart of the book. And so the heart, or your message, the heart of your message. So that would be my encouragement, is find your message and find your process.
Beautiful. Thank you. And finally, can you tell us about your podcast? How did you come up with the idea, and what lessons have you learned?
So thank you. My podcast is called the Shut Up and Teach podcast. And that's there's a chapter in my book called Shut Up and Teach. People ask me for a long time, is the title of your book Shut Up and Teach? And I just tell them, no, it's just the title of a chapter in my book. So that I can explain that really briefly, but it's really just, it's not meant to be anything negative. It's really a call to it's really an encouragement of, hey, I know that we've done this before in the past, but we can do better. I know this worked for your students last year, but we can step it up, right? I know that what you're facing right now is real, and I'm not negating that what's going on, but it's time to leave the negativity at the door, because it's time to teach, right? You can deal with your problem and I'll help you with your problem, but right now it's time to teach. And so that's what Shut Up and Teach is all about. It's not toxic positivity. It's not ignore your problems. It's really just, hey, right now in this moment, I need to be here for my students. And so, yes, that problem I'm facing is real, but I'm going to leave it in the car. And when I'm done with the day, I'll deal with it then. It's the call to step up our game, right? I know that, yes, it's easy enough to pass out a worksheet, but I can give them an engaging lesson. So I'm going to shut up and teach an engaging lesson instead of a worksheet. So that's kind of the mindset behind Shut Up and Teach. Some of the lessons that I've learned, through podcasting, again, is just more self-reflection. It started off, that was my transition from blogging into podcasting. I don't blog as much as I used to because the podcasting took over. It became my reflection. And it also became my connection. So I've been able to connect with a lot of phenomenal educators. And the podcast has grown a lot this year. So I've begun to connect with even more. So I've just learned the power of connection with others, right? I've learned the power of reflecting, continuing to reflect on our practice and having a way to go back and listen to it, so that it's not just, oh, I reflected on it and then the next day I forgot, but it's like, oh, I can go back to that. I remember one time I had this moment. I can go back to the podcast that I recorded about that and listen to what I actually said. So now I'm becoming like my own hype man, but in all seriousness, or not just my podcast, but hey, I remember I talked to Jed Derryberry about that, or I talked to, Mickey Smith Jr. and I'm going to, go back and listen to what they had to say. And so it's really been a way for me to grow professionally by reflecting and connecting.
Awesome. Now, before we leave, I'm very curious. When I saw you in person, I saw your beautiful artwork with tattoos. I have some tattoos myself, and I remember when I started looking for jobs, I will cover them, and I will even hold my shirt like this, so terrified and afraid, man. But times have changed. Can you share with us your experience with the art in your body?
The art on my body. I love that. I'm going to start calling it the art on my body. I love that. Cause it is, you don't think about that. I definitely didn't think about that before I had tattoos. I didn't think of it as art. It was just, it's a tattoo. But when you really start looking at the work that they do, it is so difficult and challenging to draw in general, but to draw on someone's skin with needle. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I don't know how they do it. But I'm thankful for it. It's because I love it. And so yeah, my tattoos, I don't know how many pieces I have. I think it's like 13 or so, and I want to get more for sure. But
Yeah,
I've
once
got
you start, you cannot stop.
you can't
Absolutely.
stop. Yeah, I know it's tough, but I don't pay for art necessarily on my wall. I pay for it on my body, and that's kind of the way I look at it. Um, but that first tattoo I got, just like you, nervous, just like, oh my gosh, like the minute they find out, they're gonna freak out. Um, and nobody did, and so it's always been kind of, I just kind of keep it to myself. I don't make a big deal out of it, and nobody else has made a real big deal out of it. But what I have found is having tattoos. Like I've got tattoos on my hands, I've got tattoos on my legs, on my arms and my chest and all that. And so having visible tattoos is powerful. It's powerful because at my school, there are a lot of parents who have visible tattoos who drop off their kids, right? And they see someone who, it's like, oh, that dude kind of looks like me. He represents me and my culture. He gets it. He's one of us. And so having visible tattoos connects people together, just because it's like, hey, tattoos. Yeah, tattoos. But then also the tattoos tell a story. When people sit down to start asking, like, hey, tell me about your puzzle piece, right? Tell me about your, let's see what else I got on here. I got the light bulb with the rose in it. Tell me about some of those, or tell me about your hands or something. It just opens doors for conversation and more connection. It just opens that up. And so I've been able to connect with a lot of parents who, are covered in tattoos, and all this stuff, and other teachers who have tattoos, and then students who are like, you have a lot of tattoos. And I'm like, yes, I do. And then we get on these conversations about tattoo etiquette and what's it like to, the feel of it, and, thinking about tattoo placements and all that. And I always tell my kids, hey, because they go off and they're like, oh, I want a hand tattoo and I want this. And I'm like, well, just, you got to think about it, because not everyone is cool with it. You just got to think about that. So take your time. Don't make any big decisions now. You're only in the 4th grade, you know, things will change as you get older, and for sure. But I love tattoos. They tell a story. At least in my case, they do, and it just creates more opportunities for connection. And I love it. I love connecting with people through that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that personal story. Elijah, this has been such a great moment spending learning from you. Any last thoughts you would like to share with the listeners and viewers of the show?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you again, Dr. Martinez, for just having me on the show. This has been a great conversation, and I've really appreciated our time together. And just for our listeners, just thank you, for joining us, and thank you for coming back to, Dr. Efrain's podcast, continuously. It's a great show, and I'm one that I'm proud to listen to and proud to be part of as on this time as well. So, yeah, if I'm easy to get in contact with. If anyone listening wants to, get connected with me, my handle's there on the screen and all that. So yeah, I'm just happy to connect. Like, let's connect.
Beautiful. Absolutely connect with Elijah. I'm sure that there's going to be more books coming up. I wish you the best of successes, Elijah, and have a fantastic Saturday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efrain Martinez.
Chulo.
And I love that production. Chill out.